We are starting Submarine Attack, and you might be reading the description and coming off of Intro to Coding, where we create 2D games. The setup seems very similar to what we were doing with Pygame. So you might be thinking to yourself, are we creating a 2D game here? And we are not. Okay, so this might need a little bit of explanation here, but yes, we do have a screen, and the top left of the screen would be 0, 0 on the X and the Y, and X increases as we move on to the right, so that would be 300, and then I believe it's a 300 by 300 box, so Y also increases as we move down to 300. So then this corner here would be 300, 300, right? So then we have our world, and this is just an idea. It's not like a physical screen that we are creating. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create the dimensions of the submarine, right? And the submarine is like a random range between 10 to 20 meters. So you would probably make sub length or something like that, S_L is equal to a random number between 10 to 20, and we're going to do that using math.random, right? And then we're going to do sub.width or height. Sub.height is equal to a random number from 40 to 70, right? And then once we have the length and the height of the sub, then we now need to generate his X and Y location. So if we have sub_X and sub_Y, which are going to be random ranges, right? But we need to ensure that the submarine lands within the box, right? That it's not outside of the box. So what does that mean? That means our X range for this sub would need to be between 0 and the width minus the sub length, right? So we need to use math.random to create a random number between 0 and the width of the world, which is 300, which should probably be placed into a constant variable, and minus the sub length, which is the random number that we generated a couple of steps earlier. So that's going to be our X. And then we're going to do the same thing for our Y, except it's going to be a little bit different. And I forgot to mention that the X and Y location of the sub represents the top left corner of the submarine. So now for the Y, well, we want this to happen, right, as our most extreme location of the sub on the Y-axis, and we want this to happen as our least extreme location on the Y-axis. So then Y would be 0 to what is it? The height of the world minus the sub_height, right? So then 300 minus this random number that was generated for the height of the submarine. And I think I got these mixed up. I think the height is between 10 to 20 and the length is between 40 to 70, because of course the sub is longer than it is tall. So then great. We generate our X and our Y location. Yeah, we generate our X and our Y location, and we are ready to play the game, right? So then now what do you need to do? You need to take an input from the user, an X and a Y location, and let's assume that we picked this spot right here as our X and our Y, right? Well, now you need to use the different math functions and the distance formula to figure out whether there has been a hit on the sub. And so there has been a direct hit if the distance from the sub to the dot is within 30, right? So if this is 30 right here, so then if any part of the submarine is within 30 units away from the blast, then it's a direct hit and the sub has gone down and you win, right? And then if, let's say we pick this spot here, the sub is within 50. Alright, this is 50. This here is 30. If the sub is within, or the blast is within 50, then it's an indirect hit. So if it's in between 50 and 30, and it touches the sub, then it's an indirect hit, and you damage the sub, and so you need to get another indirect hit to take down the sub. So a direct hit within 30 is you take out the sub. An indirect hit means you need to get another indirect hit to take out the sub, right? Another indirect hit or another direct hit, and you take out the sub. So how do you do that? Well, you got to use like the distance formula, along with some Java Kung Fu using branch statements, I believe, to figure out this kind of a problem, right? So it's not as like simple as just saying, okay, the distance from the subs x and y to the blast radius, because that's not always accurate. Like this here is more than 50, but the blast has hit the sub, right? So you got to kind of figure out a system of making sure that you check that the sub is like within that little like range. And then of course we want this to happen repeatedly because we have 10 depth charges, so it's like take an input and then check hit, right? So then we want this stuff to happen once, right? Because we're just going to generate his dimensions and the location once, and then this stuff here we want to happen like I think 10 times, right? So we want to loop that 10 times. And then I believe there's another functionality where you look for another sub because you took them out, right? So like let's say we get out of this loop successfully, then all of this should happen again because you chose to search for the next sub, right? And if you did choose to attack the next sub or search for it, then that sub's length and height would need to be generated, and his x and y position would need to be generated before you start this game up again. So that might be confusing, so let me know and I will clear it up for you, hopefully. But the main part of this program is figuring out whether you got the direct hit or indirect hit, and that's like figuring this out is the main part of this program here.